Okay, everyone, I think we are officially live for our very first DHIS2 for Education live question and answer session. If you're with us today, that means that you have found your way to the education thread of the community of practice for DHIS2. So really a big warm welcome to those of you who are new to the community of practice. And we're very happy to have you here and look forward to seeing you and interacting with you in the future on the Community of Practice page. So the Community of Practice is a very interesting space. It's filled with people from all walks of the DHIS2 community, and it really is a lovely area for you to come and ask questions or find out stories that are happening around different DHIS2 implementations. So we really hope that in the future you will be here with us, engaging with us. And this is just a first step for us to try a live question and answer session as a way to engage you more and build more of a community around the work we're doing in education. The reason why we are doing a live Q&A today is really a follow-up to the annual conference education session that we had in June, where we talked about extending DHIS2 for the DHIS2 software platform from the health sector to education. In that session, we talked about experiences on how this solution is really driven by local demands. We're leveraging existing DHIS2 capacity and expertise, and we're trying to build a really strong research base that underpins the platform development and implementation. But the agenda was really filled and packed with great experiences from implementation in countries like Uganda, Eswatini, the Gambia, Togo and Sri Lanka, and very little time was actually left for reflections that came from the presentations. So this open session we thought was a great time to actually sit and spend time with you on some of the questions that you had. Some people have even sent us in questions prior to us going live today, and we can discuss these questions in an informal way. So let's kick off. I think the most important thing to share with you before we get to our panelists is that on the live COP post where you are now, there is a reply button at the bottom right-hand corner of the post. And on that reply button, if you click it, a little box will pop up and you can pop your question right into that box and send that to us live and directly. And we'll be watching and sharing that with the Q&A experts today. Feel free to post your questions on either French or English, as we'll be able to answer in both languages. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our panel today. First up is Monica. Monica, in the top left corner of my screen, is a PhD student at the University of Oslo, and she's working with the Health Information Systems Program, or HISP Uganda, to support implementation of DHIS2 as an education management information system. Monica has worked with LMIS training and grants as a LMIS training and grants coordinator with HISP Uganda, where she supported implementation of DHIS2 as a logistic management information system. She's got over 10 years of experience supporting national, subnational facility levels in strengthening health information systems, as well as supply chain logistics for improved service delivery. So with this background, we are really lucky to have her to bring this expertise into a lens of what we're doing for education. Her PhD is actually focused on the implementation and documentation of the use of DHIS2 as a decentralized education management information system in Uganda. So for this Q&A session, she really has a wide range of experience to share on how DHIS2 has been adopted to support education data management for routine planning, evidence-based decision-making, and emergency planning and response in Uganda. So Monica, welcome, and so glad to have you on today.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for the kind introduction. Thank you.
Wonderful. And then on my bottom left, I have Jerry. Jerry Atsu-Aziawa is an ICT professional and has been working with HISP West and Central Africa since 2012. He's collaborated with ministries of health and ministries of education in several countries, developing national databases using DHIS2 for really almost a decade. He's currently working on 2 key DHIS2 implementation projects for education. This is in the Gambia and Togo. And Jerry, as always, doesn't hesitate to share his DHIS2 experience in regional academies, webinars, live sessions. And with a bachelor's degree in software engineering and being bilingual in French and English, we're very lucky that we can actually take your questions both in French and English today. So thank you for that, Jerry. Great. So as said, great if you can join us in posting your questions live on the COP using that reply button. We're going to be picking up your questions as we go. But we actually did receive a couple of questions that came in via email. So we thought we'd get started with that. Our internet connection might not be so strong today, so our Q&A experts might be turning off their cameras, but we'll see how the connection holds up for us for now. So to kick us off, we got a great question. Thanks for the colleague that sent this in. Basically, they posed that during the annual conference, we heard presentations from Uganda, Eswatini, the Gambia, Togo, and Sri Lanka. But I was wondering how many countries in total are currently using DHIS2 for educational purposes, and do they all have experience from using DHIS2 in the health sector? So I'll leave it at that. I think that's probably a question for both of you, so I'll leave you to that.
Okay, maybe I'll start. So hi everyone. So, well, Monica, you can start. Is it okay, Monica? Okay, fine. You can start, Monica.
Thank you, Jerry. You can go ahead. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, great. So actually we have 6 countries that are actually adopting DHIS2, and we have the Gambia, the Togo, we have Uganda, we have Eswatini, we have Mozambique. And what you probably know is that in this case, you probably have countries that use DHIS2 for education and we haven't actually heard of, because I mean, DHIS2 is quite flexible. So you have a lot of countries using it for different purposes. I once was in an academy and I had to encounter someone who was actually using it for education in DRC, but it was actually focused on performance-based financing. So, I mean, currently we have 6, but we could actually have others.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Over to you, Monica.
And thank you very much, Jerry. And I think, like Jerry has said, we have, yes, right now 6 countries that are adopting DHIS2 for education. However, we are also in dialogues and at early stages with a number of other countries that are really interested in implementing DHIS2 for education in their various countries. For example, we've had requests from Liberia, requests from Asia, including Iraq. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to implement DHIS2 for education and get it started rapidly based on the different experiences that we are gathering in these current 6 countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And following on from that question, there's been a few people who have asked the same, and that this is, do we have to be familiar with DHIS2 from the health domain to actually start using it in an education space?
Not really, not in particular. You don't have to be familiar with DHIS2 in order to implement it in the education domain. Given that it's open source and you can customize it, and it has actually been customized also in other sectors such as agriculture, natural resources. It's being used as an M&E tool. So basically, I think what is required is the passion. So if countries are passionate, for example, we are implementing it in Eswatini, and Eswatini is not using DHIS2 for health. So, and the team is very passionate, and as long as you have a passionate team that is ready to embrace new technologies, I think you can implement it in education without prior knowledge of implementing it in health. Thank you.
Yes, I do agree with her. We don't necessarily need to be in the health domain to actually use DHIS2. And usually when we try to implement, we train the core team in how to use DHIS2 with the key concepts, and they usually understand. They are not from the health domain. I mean, when we did it in the Gambia or Togo, they understood straightforward how things are done, and they understand the concept, and we build it together. So they just know they have their experience from the education domain, and we use that to build the system. But we do acknowledge that having a country where you're already using DHIS2 for help can help, because there's this possibility of sharing the experience between the two countries, because I mean the two domains, sorry, whereby in health they have implementation experience, they have implemented it already, they had challenges here and there, and they were able to mitigate those challenges. So I mean, when they are around, they can actually give some tips to the Ministry of Education about how to go about these challenges and over.
Thank you both very much for that. A question that came in was really around systems communicating with one another. So someone was asking, if my country already uses DHIS2 in the health domain and they want to implement in the education domain, is there any way that the systems can communicate with each other across these domains to get some sort of, synergy effects? And maybe this question, we can start off with you, Jerry, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, of course. Okay. Yes, of course, you can actually have both. We can actually have this possibility of interacting between two systems, because I mean, what happens most of the time is that you have data from health that is quite relevant for education. So you could actually get that information. For example, if there is a specific outbreak in a region, you can actually inform the schools, and they could actually have that data into their system, whereby they could actually take action, because they could educate. For example, when it comes to COVID, you could actually educate the learners about how to wash their hand, how to have a safe distance between, and all those safety actions that we need to take for avoiding to have a spread of that disease. We could have it, because you could have that information from health. And when it comes to the health domain, they also need sometimes information from education. Like, for example, if you have campaigns in schools, you probably need to have information about the pupils or the learners in the school. And I mean, this is something that is possible, and it's actually wished, because we could have more items for analysis over.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Just to add on to what Jerry has said, I think like he indicated, the need for the two systems communicating to each other is very key. Like if we are both implementing DHIS2 in health and as well as education, it becomes easier for the different ministries to communicate to each other and share critical information that is relevant for information use. A case in point is in Uganda, we've used this data from DHIS2 in education to inform the immunization campaign, and this was in particular measles rubella campaign. And you find that in schools that provided this data on enrollment, they were able to be provided with sufficient vaccines, and the children were vaccinated timely, vis-a-vis the schools that maybe weren't able to provide this data in districts where this is not yet being implemented. So it's very important to have these synergies and exchanges between the different ministries. And also, I think in the wake of COVID, this has proven to be more than very relevant, because you find that the health ministry is depending on the education ministry to provide data. So having this system implemented in both ministries really strengthens the cross-sector synergies in providing vital statistics for information use. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. That's really key, and it leads quite nicely on to a comment that came in specifically directed to you, recently you posted a community of practice post about a COVID surveillance in schools pilots that you're involved with. So our colleague is asking, could you tell us a bit more about this work?
Oh, thank you very much, Sophia, for that question. Yeah, in Uganda, during at the start of the COVID pandemic, we decided, because we've already started implementing DHIS2 for education, so we thought, what can we use the system for in response to COVID in schools? So this was an opportunity for us to pilot school-based surveillance in various schools where we are implementing. And we've learned a lot from this pilot, where we are collecting key statistics or data, relevant indicators on learners that are screened for COVID on a daily basis. We are screening them for maybe temperature and all the other symptoms that are related to COVID. And then this data is relayed via an SMS. So schools, even without computers or internet, can be able to send through this data using their light phones. And so this data is relayed into the system at no cost to the school, and is available at the school level, at the district level, and also to the COVID response team at the district level, as well as the ministry level, both Ministry of Health and Education. So we're able to get critical data timely, and also respond to this data. Which schools are reporting maybe learners that have COVID-related symptoms, and then the teams will be able to follow up with them, link them up to health facilities. So this has really been very pivotal in implementation of COVID response, and we hope that this is going to be scaled up. And now that we are planning reopening of schools, this COVID school surveillance is going to be scaled up to other schools and other districts across the country. And we think it will also help in keeping and promoting the safety of learners in schools. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. And for anyone that wants to read that community of practice post by Monica, you can just click on the education thread, and you will see any stories from the field or similar related. You'll see Monica's post on this pilot there. And just a reminder to anyone that's joined us now for the live stream, you can ask your questions live on the community of practice. So if you just scroll your page down towards the reply section on the right-hand side of the post, you can post your questions live. So another question that has come in, both very exciting. This one is talking a bit about scale. So the colleague is saying that scaling can take place along many different dimensions, but are there any noteworthy differences between, or even similarities in scaling DHIS2 implementations in education compared to in health?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit tricky, but I mean, let me just talk about the differences that we have. First of all, what you could actually understand is that the relevance of using information for decision making was more in health and education. It's now coming in education, but it was there all along for a while in health. And they kind of have data that they send sometimes monthly, even weekly for disease surveillance. So data it's there at a certain point of time, and there's a need to have this data of good quality for decision making. So it has been there. So they actually expressed the need of having an information system. Whereby in education, what we realize is that the data is usually collected yearly. So they actually didn't actually work towards having a relevant information or electronic information system. So that is also one thing that we realize, that there's a gap between both of them. what you also realize is that for health, things have been decentralized. So they having this possibility to empower the district, to empower the health facilities, to have that data and to use it for decision making. Whereas what we realize for education, it's more or less centralized, where data is sent to the ministry for decision making, where it's not that used at the local level. Yes, we realize that in some cases you have people are now using this data at the local level, but formerly it was more meant to be bottom-top affair, where data was sent to the ministry for use. And then we also have the financing, because I mean, for health, you have various programs that are there that are actually contributing to the system, where they actually finance or fund some of the activities. Yes, sometimes you have duplicate effort, but I mean, this has an advantage whereby you could actually have funding for various activities. Whereas in education, this is not really the case. So it actually has like a consequence where when you go on the field, you realize that when it comes to infrastructure or resources, you don't have the same kind of resources. And since it's more centralized, you have more resource on the centralized area than compared to the operational area when it comes to education. So those are the things that we actually found out when we were trying to build. And there was also this issue of funding, and that is also, we realized that there is more funding in health and education, primarily because of the fact that we have various health programs in health. So that's something that you see as a difference. But when it comes to things that are very, I mean, that are quite similar, we realize that they usually have the same administrative structure, and they also have the same need to have data at their disposal for decision making. So they also need the data. So they actually want a system that could actually give them relevant data of good quality for decision making. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you, Jerry. I think well said. You've really been elaborate on this question. Maybe just to add on, I think the question was also talking, I think initially asking about scaling taking place along many dimensions. So this got me thinking of, you know, in health and education, yes, in health, we've had scale maybe across all districts. It has been decentralized, even down to health facilities and high volume health facilities. But like Jerry said, you have in education, we are collecting data on an annual basis, whereas in the health sector, you find that data is collected at a more frequent basis. So you have to look at, if data is being collected at a more frequent basis, how far down can you scale? Because that means you require, I think, more human resource. You require to collect all this data. In health, we have so many forms that we are entering, whereas in education, we've had only one form. Like in the case of Uganda, we have an annual statistical form that is entered once a year. So it also depends on the capacity of the facilities, or in this case, in education, of the schools. In Uganda, you look at, we have over 50,000 schools. So if you're scaling and you want to collect individual data on learners, let's say attendance data, data on teachers, time on task. So you have to look at all those parameters and also the resources that are going to be required to actually implement that scale up to the lowest level. So you have to strike a balance. Do I maybe scale up to district level and collect aggregate data from the schools? Or if the resources are adequate, can I go down up to the school level? So you're looking at also infrastructure at school level, the internet, and also the ability of the school administrators to enter this data. So we have to look at all those different aspects and see for big countries that have so many schools, how far can they scale? And maybe for countries, in the case of Gambia, where Jerry is implementing, where they have few schools, can they go down up to individual level and be able to collect this individual data from all the schools? So those are all the different aspects that I think you could think of as we scale DHIS2 for education. Thank you. Over to you, Sophia.
Well, I'll probably add this, something that we try to do in the Gambia, because I mean, when we're trying to implement, we realized that the resources were not the same. So there's a need to find a way to present the data in a different format. I mean, formally, when you have an electronic system, you tend to use electronic format to send the data you want the data to be there on their computers, you want the data to be there on their tablets, on their phones. But what if you don't have all those infrastructure? So there is a need to try to find a way to send that data into another format, because the thing is, we want to have a system that is available for decision making, and we need to think about what is the format that is convenient for the user. So in the Gambia, we try to develop what we call a school report card, which is a system where we have designed in DHIS2. Of course, DHIS2 is flexible. You can develop an application on top of it. So we developed an application that actually mimics a school report card that they have, that they use for decision making at the local level. So what happens is that that data could be extracted from the system. You can just print it on paper, and then just as a cluster monitor or someone from the operational level, district level, can have that information available on paper, a format that is suitable for people, and you could actually present that during PTA meetings and other discussions. So it's actually bringing the data to the local level. The aim is to make sure that the system is used for information, for decision making. So we need to think about the format that is adequate for education. So we are thinking it's a work in progress. We're working on that to find something that is convenient. There's also one thing you need to consider, is that in the Gambia, we're trying to move to individual recording, where you want to record all the learners individually. But for that, you need to make sure, to understand that you have like a high group of a population, I mean, learners. So people from probably 6 to 18 years old in the system, that will be tracked, or they'll be tracked. And there's a need to understand that infrastructure-wise, you need to have a very high capacity server, because you're going to have a lot of information, of detailed information. So when you're trying to implement those things, you need to make sure that you have a very important server. In health, you usually focus on specific programs like tuberculosis, like HIV, which is like a small number of the population. But here you are talking about people maybe from 6 to 25 or more, which is in Africa, for example, it's a large number of the population. So you need to think about the infrastructure that you need to use for scaling. Over.
Sophia, if you could just allow me add on to something that I've just thought about. I think that is also very critical for scale, is the need to involve all the various stakeholders. And here we are looking at, of course, the ministries and more especially partners. This reminds me of our scenario here in Uganda while we are implementing DHIS2 for health. You find that we had so many partners pulling resources and supporting the implementation. So this kind of like eased the implementation process, because different partners were contributing to the needs of implementation of this program across the entire country. So I think it's very important to harmonize the funders, the partners' needs into one harmonized role, or achieve one harmonized process in order to support that implementation. So I think also in the case of implementing DHIS2 for education, it's very important to ensure that all these partners' priorities are actually aligned to the vision, or if the ministry adopts DHIS2 for education, it needs to try to really align all the partner priorities so that resources are optimized and are put in the same basket and used for that implementation. That makes the scale up and implementation very, very easy. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica and Jerry. It's really interesting reflections. And just so that everyone knows, we will be posting the questions that were posed to us via email and the answers onto the COP in case you want to have a look at some of these reflections at a later date. So thank you. We've had a new question that's come in on the COP, our very first, very exciting for today's session. This is from Knut Staring, and he says, he's asking, and I think you've alluded both to this, especially you, Jerry, in your previous example, but obviously countries vary quite widely. But since DHIS2 is such a flexible platform, could you tell us a bit more about other ways that a country could make use of it for their needs, just because of that flexibility?
Yes, of course. You could actually use DHIS2 for agriculture. I mean, people used it for like we use it for education now. We also were supposed to use it for transport, and I think people are also using it for the Ministry of Transport. We actually even worked in Burundi, where we have something like that, where we are trying to use it for monitoring and evaluation. So DHIS2 is quite flexible. It's not actually related to health. I mean, you cannot, if you want to implement DHIS2 and you are from another domain, you could do it because it's quite flexible. And there's also one thing you could do is that sometimes it might occur that a feature that you will want is not present in the current version of DHIS2, but you have this possibility of actually developing an application on top of it. So it helps us actually meet the needs of the ministries, the clients, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to know that DHI is quite flexible and can even develop solutions on top of it. We've developed a lot. The school report card was an app. We're currently developing an app for education that could suit attendance and so on and so forth. And we also have other applications in various domains that we use because we actually were having challenges and we found work around it by developing applications.
Yeah, Jerry, just to add on to, I think what you've said, and also give an example here in Uganda and Rwanda, where we implemented DHIS2 was used in natural resources, tracking minerals and also forests. The forest coverage in Rwanda. And also here in Uganda, beyond health, it has been adopted by various non-governmental organizations. And you find that these ones are using it for their M&E planning and reporting. And also it has been used in the human rights section. Here we have an NGO that is really passionate about human rights, and they are using DHIS2 for that purpose. And just to mention also now in the government sector, because now previously, of course, it has been adopted besides the health sector, it was adopted by the NGOs. But then we are also seeing that the government sector is slowly adopting DHIS2 for implementation of their various programs. In Uganda, we have seen, we are adopting it in the National Planning Authority as a key M&E tool. So they've tried and tested all the other applications, but then they required licensing, and DHIS2 doesn't require a license. So you find that now they've adopted DHIS2. HISP Uganda is actually supporting them to implement that. And so they will be using it to track all the indicators in all government ministries, in all local governments, up to parish level. So it's a very important use case for us right now, because it's going to showcase in the planning sector what the capability of DHIS2 will be able to achieve. And also it has been adopted by the Office of the Auditor General, and now it's going to be used to track response to audits. You know, the Auditor General goes down to districts, local governments, and does performance audits on the various activities that are being implemented. So now they've adopted it to see and ensure that all these local governments respond and give evidence to these audit queries. So it's being used beyond health, and I think it's giving us very many use cases to really prove that this is a flexible system that can be adopted by any other government agency or partner that requires to use it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, both. And to understand that term of flexibility in such a broad manner, I think is really very interesting. So thank you for that. We have another question on the COP. Knut is asking, he mentions that we talked about EMIS supporting individual schools and that we're even aiming for individual students, for example, in the Gambia. So he's wondering if we could talk a bit more about the possible benefits and the challenges of including individual teachers and students.
Okay, great. Yes, we are currently implementing that in the Gambia. And I mean, the aim is to actually make sure that the system is used at the school level for decision making. Because what we realize is that data is mainly used at the central level for decision making, but it doesn't actually tackle all the problems, because probably you know that you have like 80% of attendance during the year, but you cannot pinpoint who is being attended, who's not being attended, because it might be linked to social issues. You don't know, it might be linked to the fact that maybe it's a girl and the parents are asking her to do home trials. So she doesn't have this possibility to go to school. So with the individual learner, we could actually record everyone and, for example, record attendance of all those pupils or learners. And then we can know if this person has been attending school. You could actually, then the teacher could actually pinpoint this and maybe make analysis and realize that during this period, this child is not coming to school. Usually you have it on paper, so it's maybe a bit tricky to do the analysis, but with an application like this, or a platform like this, you could actually understand the problem. You can actually have this data with socioeconomics data, because for the Gambia, for example, we are actually adding socioeconomics data. So we want to know if the settings, the socioeconomic setting of a child actually impacts a lot on their learning ability and so on and so forth. It can also be linked to attendance. Maybe if you come in for poor settings, maybe the parents don't have enough funds to bring you to school, so you'll not be attending class. And of course, if you don't attend class, you probably have poor grades. So you could actually link this, and you can even link this from attendance to grade and see people that are coming maybe late or are not attending classes. If they are, we want to know if they are performing well and trying to find ways to tackle the issue. The thing with this is that you can pinpoint the person that is actually having the issue and try to solve it. And you can actually also understand it from various data that we have in the system. That is one of the benefits that I found. It's part of the benefits that you have in the system. But the challenges that we're probably going to have, it's mainly infrastructure and resources for me. One is that you need to have at least a device for analysis in those schools. We're thinking of, we're currently using Chromebooks in the Gambia, it's a very good solution whereby you could have like a PC-like setting with a battery that stays for a long period of time, and you could actually have, for example, a SIM card to send the data. Now, in DHIS2, you could even send the data through SMS. So it is possible, for example, to send that data, individual data through SMS if you don't have internet. But at least you need to have a machine where you could actually punch in the data and send it. It could be anyway, you have this possibility of using devices like phones and tablets. But I think this is one thing that we're probably going to have a challenge. The second one is probably human resources. There's a need to actually have someone at the school that could actually use those tools, and there's a need to follow up those ones, because what happens when you're trying to have an individual system is that people need to be more. There's a need to have a regular support, so the team needs to be around to actually mentor them and so on and so forth. So there's a need to know that those are the challenges that you're probably going to have in the system. And of course, there's this thing of having the capacity of capacity of the server that you're going to use. Oh, of course, when you want to do this, you need to know that you need to go gradually. You don't need to put everything in one basket, because I usually say that when it comes to implementing, you could have a very nice system, but I mean, the users need to be accustomed to it. You're telling them to use an electronic system. Some of them might not be used to it. So you need to make it very easy for them in the beginning, so they learn step by step. They have something that is quite easy. When they are very used to it, you can add another feature, something that is more relevant to them. But like when you want to scale for this, the individual tracker, you need to if you want to have an individual record, you need to make sure that the components come bit by bit so that the users are used to it. Because if you have a very complex system, then the users might not use it. And I mean, it's a failure because you have a very nice system, but it's not used for the purpose, not used for decision making. And we are actually working towards the use of data for decision making.
Jerry, thanks so much for that. And actually just like connecting to what you were saying there, question came in about who is the target audience for DHIS2 for education. Are we talking primary schools, secondary schools? Are we talking very high level stakeholders? Who is it, the community? Maybe you could explain a bit more, both you and Monica, about, you know, who are the audience members, who are the people interacting with the system?
Monica?
Thank you. I could go fast, Jerry. Thank you. So I think the target audience for DHIS2 for education is the entire continuum of the education sector, really. So I think from the top level at the ministry level, you need this data really to inform policies and changing policies, and also formulating new policies. They have to be informed by evidence-based data. So I think it's important at that level. Then when you move down to lower levels, we are talking about districts. And also in line with what Jerry indicated in the previous question about the benefits, I think when you empower lower levels, they really, when you empower them to use this data, it becomes critical, and they are using this data for, you know, routine decision making at their levels. So they are really empowered to see that, you know, they are making decisions on, let's say, for example, where to put a classroom block, how many latrine instances that they should construct based on the data, on those key indicators that they've analyzed. So it's at lower levels, I think it's more about empowerment of the districts to use this data. And also at school level, like Jerry really elaborated, it's important to use this data in their routine activities. This data needs to inform decisions that they make at school level, at district level, decisions that impact on learners and also on the entire really education. Then also at community level, I think there it becomes more of an accountability aspect as well, in addition to all these other levels or all these other benefits. Because at community level, you're saying, look, you gave us your learners and this is how they are performing, or you're paying for your learners and this is the accountability. These are the learners that were able to maybe, you know, access textbooks, or as in you're giving that accountability to the parents and the communities, so they actually feel happy that you're giving them this information, and they are actually driven to ask for additional information to inform, if a parent is contributing to the PTA and they are asking for accountability and they're able to give it. Or if you're not, then they hold you accountable for that if maybe services are not being provided in schools. So all in all, I think the target audience is along the entire continuum of the education sector, because at all levels, data is very critical and relevant to be used to inform the decisions at the various levels. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I think you're right, Monica. There is a need to understand that it's not the ministry is not all the people. The donors are not the ones that are supposed to use the data all the time. We need to bring the data at the local level, at the operational level, because at the community level. So this could actually influence. They are part of the ecosystem, and they need to be informed so that they could actually make decisions, because parents can make decisions. This could actually educate parents about this situation and that. So parents also need to have the information. They need to be educated on some information effects of what is happening, maybe in their settings. Maybe like if they in that region, they are not allowing girls to go to school, for example. There's a need to understand that. There's a need to actually educate them. Having that data at local level can help, because they could find the right approach for tackling that kind of issue. Over.
Excellent, thank you both. There's been a few more questions that have come in on the COP. One I'm going to take for now is from A. Grace. Thank you, A. Grace, for your question. We have, how can DHIS2 for EMIS be used by school inspectors and monitors to support school monitoring and to inform evidence-based support supervisions for schools?
Okay, I think for that, I have an example for the Gambia, where we actually have school inspectors, they call them cluster monitors. So they actually monitor attendance. So they have like this tablet where they have the information about attendance from the school. Now, the thing is, they go to the schools and actually see what is happening. Maybe they realize that this particular school is not is having low attendance. They actually go and they want to understand why there is an issue here. Maybe it's something that is related to the environment. Maybe it's related to something else. But they are not also focusing on students. They are focusing on teachers, because they realize that in some cases you have teachers that don't come to teach, and they come late, and that also impacts the learning process of a learner. Because I mean, if a teacher doesn't come, then he missed the class, but the learners were there and they didn't actually get anything from that period. So it's really important for them to monitor attendance, and they are currently using that, and we actually make it possible. And that was the development of a mobile app that we use. So the data is sent through SMS, and they actually have the data stored locally for analysis. So it actually helps the inspectors to use DHIS2 for monitoring, and we made it possible to use the data locally. Yes, the data is sent on a server for analysis at a higher level, but we also made it sure that they could actually use the data locally to monitor the schools.
Yeah, sure. And maybe just to add briefly, Jerry, on that, I think it is important, given that we are in resource limited settings, it's really important to target our support supervision to optimize our resources. So I think DHIS2 for education is a tool that can also give us that opportunity to leverage on the limited resources and focus them to, specific activities that have impact. So for the case of the district inspectors, you find that they have this wealth of information from DHIS2, and they are able to see, for example, which schools are not reporting or which schools are poorly performing on specific indicators. And I think given the limited resources in our settings, you find that those should be the schools that should be prioritized for inspection, for support supervision. In Uganda, we also have challenges of reporting. You may find that reporting rates are really low in the private sector. So you find that when you analyze this data in DHIS2 and you have low reporting rates, let's say in the private schools, so the inspectors are able to target those schools and be able to address all those reporting challenges that could be around that, and also encourage these schools to report. Because I think sometimes the mentality has been, this is a private school, I'm not required to report, this data is only for government institutions. Whereas when it comes to government resources or services, for example, constructing a road, this road is going to benefit both the public and the private schools. So it's important to really see how to leverage on the limited resources to do targeted supervision that is informed by these key indicators in the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both. And looking at our time, I think one of the final questions we'll be taking, to those questions we don't get to, we will be responding on the community of practice. But I think it's really about sustainability would be a key theme to round off with for today. One of the key focuses of the work that you're doing is really building the knowledge to address sustainability for digitized EMIS, right? And that's strengthened through your implementation research, through participatory innovation. So when it comes to sustainability, Knut has been asking us, how do we go about a country building sufficient knowledge to manage the system we're talking about and changing its asset needs and just ensuring long-term sustainability? Wondering if you have any reflections on that.
Yes, of course, we need to make sure that the system is sustainable. I mean, implementing a system that dies maybe 2 years later, it's something that we don't want. And there are various ways that we make sure that this system is sustainable. One thing we do is to discuss a lot with the local, the country. Every stakeholder to understand the needs, to understand what will be the challenges, so we could mitigate that to ensure that the system is sustainable. When we're trying to design the system itself, we actually work a lot with the stakeholders, especially the EMIS team. So we have an EMIS team, for example, in the Gambia, and here in Togo we have an EMIS team. So we work together. We actually make sure that they understand how the thing is built. They build with us together. We want them to own the system so that if we are no more there 100% to support, they could actually maintain the system. So they build the system with us. They understand how it has been built, and we go through a process of maintenance together where we actually support them in the beginning for maintenance, but we make sure that they do it themselves. Nowadays, when it comes to updating the system in the Gambia, they do it themselves, for example, and this makes sure that when there is a change in the system, they could do it by their own. This also is already important to ensure sustainability. We actually build capacity by for example, during academies, we build academy. We are having an upcoming. Probably going to have an academy for education, but we have this possibility of building capacity through academies. We also have this possibility of building capacity through other types of training. So we train them on probably things like app development and other things related to maybe to the maintenance of the system, server configuration, server maintenance, and so on and so forth. So we build the capacity around the technical capacity, but we also make sure that people in the system are used to the system. So we make sure that we have this possibility of supporting the local needs. We make sure that we are able to assist the ones on the field that actually enter and analyze the data. And there is a constant supervision of follow-up to see if there are issues. Because we also have this issue of turnovers, where you have someone that's been trained to do something and then finds a job opportunity that is better than what he has. And it goes, and then someone else comes and doesn't use the data or doesn't use the system because maybe he wasn't trained to do so. So there's a need, for example, to do follow-ups, and we do that usually so that we know what are the difficulties, challenges people are facing. So these are the key things that we use for sustainability.
Thanks, Jerry. I think you're really spot on that. And to just add briefly, I think also what is important for sustainability is ownership. So ownership here, I'm talking about at ministry level, at district level, at school level, at community level. So from the word go, as we implement these systems, it's very important that we try to get buy-in, and so that it's owned by the ministry. And you have indicated you train the ministry team, train the district to actually extract this data to maintain and support the system by themselves. And I think what is also very important is initially, or from the word go, we need to advocate on inclusion of some of these activities in the routine work plans of the ministries, of the districts, because it's really important. Because this is, let's say, a web-based system, and maybe it will require internet, it will require periodic support supervisions and trainings. But then can all this be incorporated into the ministry strategic plans and also work plans, so that from during planning, all this is integrated, and at that, all these activities are able to be implemented and the system is continuously supported. So I think that is very important. And of course, lastly, given that we have a very large community, we have built a community over the last 20 years, we have experts across very many countries and regions. So we need to tap into this, the knowledge of these different experts to be able to support these country implementations and also disseminate this knowledge to the country teams to be able to take on the system implementation. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. And indeed, as you're talking about, 20 plus years of experience, a burgeoning community, the COP, the community of practice, I think if my numbers are correct, from June was 3,500 members. So that's one of the reasons we really wanted to invite you to this live stream here today on the community of practice. And we're so appreciative for those of you who have asked us questions on the platform. We hope that we can see you in the future there with lots more stories and posts from the work that the team is doing, and also to answer questions, get into discussions, and just share a lot more of the knowledge base that's being built around DHIS2 for education. So I want to say thank you to our panelists. It was such a pleasure listening to your experiences, your reflections. Thank you for being our guinea pigs for the very first live stream of the COP. We'll see how it went. And I look forward to many more. I hope you do too. Thanks so much.
Sure. We look forward to many more interactions. And I think our countries are free to get in touch with us, and in case they need more information, we are more than willing to share. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much, Jerry and Monica.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sophia.
Bye, everyone out there.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.